Watch this.
Apparently, we're in the home stretch for the legislative session. Lawmakers are working to get through the remainder of workable bills on the agenda, which makes for a long workday and feisty rapid-fire debates. Common Core school standards have always seemed to carry common complaints from parents and teachers. Now there's a common goal of getting rid of it and what standards would take their place. After nearly 2 years of COVID protocols, one of the last school districts in the state with a mask mandate is about to drop theirs. Well, happy Transmittal Day to those political hounds who celebrate such things. Transmittal Day is supposed to be the deadline set by both the Senate Pro Tem and the Speaker of the House to get any bill that is in one chamber with enough votes and transferred over to the other side for their consideration. Transmittal Day, although I could have sworn there was talk around the State House of changing the name to just Middle Day since trans in the majority party, and I digress. So this day usually means a marathon of legislation being deliberated in each respective chamber. Why is that day today? Well, because lawmakers are hoping to get done by the end of this month at the latest, meaning we likely won't see what we saw last year with the longest session in history. So what does an abundant agenda look like? Well, on the House side, that list includes 39 bills and concurrent resolutions, just those who have made it through committee. Those that haven't made it through committee, still kind of in a holding pattern. Think of things like the repeal of the grocery tax or the gas bill. Those are still on hold. But what about what was on the agenda? By our count, there are currently 5 bills bouncing around the State House that would either tighten voting qualifications or restrict the ease and accessibility of voting in Idaho. From what's acceptable as a form of ID to the number of absentee ballots one can carry to where someone could drop off said absentee ballots.
House Bill 693 simply would prohibit the use of drop-off boxes or similar drop-off locations to collect absentee ballots.
And it would be that simple. Yes, it would certainly not simplify the voting process for a lot of Idahoans, though. Ballot drop boxes became a big thing during the 2020 election year, especially in the May primary when polling places were closed because of the spreading COVID pandemic. All votes in that election, in the primary election, were done by absentee, but their popularity of these boxes and absentee ballots continued into the November general election. For example, in Ada County, more voters voted by absentee ballot for president than in person on Election Day, according to election records. That included mail-in ballots, drop box ballots, and those who just walked them into the county clerk's office. But House Bill 693, as Representative Giddings said, would ban election drop boxes for absentee voters across the state. Drop boxes, she said, aren't really necessary anymore. Giddings said allowing those drop boxes, even during an emergency declaration, goes against election laws already in place with regard to absentee ballots. She quoted Idaho Code 34-1005.
It says the return envelope shall be mailed or delivered to the officer who issued the same. That's what I want to draw your attention to. The intent for these absentee ballots to be for people who were out of the state, out of the country, our military service members. And so the guidance was for it to be mailed or delivered. Taking your ballot to another location and dropping it off somewhere where there's not an individual, where there's not security, does not count as mailed or delivered to the officer who issued the same. So I would argue that drop boxes are currently operating outside of the scope of the law.
Well, that brought up a few questions about the boxes in general, like from Representatives John Gannon from Boise and Megan Blanksma from Hemet, who asked, what's the difference between a ballot drop-off box and a normal blue post office drop-off box?
Most importantly, what is the problem here? Where is the problem with drop boxes? For 40 years, I've lived on the Boise bench for 40 years, and for 40 years, there's been a mailbox on Latah Street. And I have dropped off checks frequently over the 40 years. I don't know, maybe 50 or 100 into the mailbox, and it goes out in the mail. In fact, we have mail drop boxes all over Boise.
For those of you who haven't been to a rural post office, they aren't manned the whole time. So when you drop it off, you are dropping it off in a drop-off box. That's what happens. It's a little blue thing, sits right outside the post office, and you drop that in there.
Representative Blanksma also pointed out how efficient these drop boxes were for rural voters. It gave them options without having to rely on the questionable U.S. Postal Service. Removing that option might make it more difficult for voters in districts like hers, she said, to which a couple of representatives responded this way.
Not sure how to say this, but sometimes convenience isn't the best option.
We're trying to make it into almost a frivolous process. You just drive by and put your ballot in a box. I think it doesn't need to be convenient. It needs to be important. It needs to be a moment when you really stop and think about things.
Stop and think about things, like maybe when you can stop and sit down at your kitchen table and review the levies, the initiatives, and judges and candidates at your convenience, and then really take the time to think about things, then maybe fill out that ballot and take it to a secure drop box, which brought up the question of the security of these drop boxes and overall election integrity.
Drop boxes could be ripe for tampering or fraud or whatever else the imagination can come up with. We shouldn't have to wait for an election to get wrecked before we say, oh, we need to fix the process. And the drop boxes are an opportunity for wrecking an election. I know there's federal laws and it's a felony to tamper with a U.S. postal box. Are there similar laws against tampering with an absentee ballot drop box?
Well, Nate didn't know the answer to that question, but what we do know is that there wasn't any incidents of tampering or vandalism or evidence of fraud in relation to any ballot drop boxes in Idaho. However, in case there was some question, Representative Blanksma found the answer to Nate's question right there in Idaho Code 182306. What you would have heard her say is illegal voting or interference with election. It covers things like anyone who votes or isn't supposed to votes more than once or changes. There's a soundbite in there, I should say. There is a part of that says there's an election law. So illegal voting or interference with elections, it covers things like anyone who votes isn't supposed to vote. The middle of this paragraph in 181306, this one right here, 182306, excuse me. The part where it says every person with intent to change the result of such an election or carries away or destroys or attempts to carry away or destroy any poll list or ballot box for the purpose of breaking up or invalidating such election or willfully detains, mutilates, or destroys any election returns as to prevent such election or canvass from being fairly held and lawfully conducted. Yeah, it says all that right there. It says is guilty of a felony.
It makes it a felony to tamper. It's right there. So if anybody touches a drop box, touches a ballot, attempts to interfere with the election, it's already a felony. This is where we get the penalty.
It is, and Idaho Code 1823-16 also deals specifically with tampering with ballots, which is also a felony with at least a year in prison. So there is already a law making it illegal to tamper, change, damage, destroy a ballot, including those inside a ballot drop box. But now, like a lot of things we discovered during the pandemic that made life more convenient and more accessible for Idahoans, like those boxes, well, now those boxes are now one step closer to being banned from being used ever again in Idaho. The bill passed 37-33 and now goes to the Senate. The House also approved two other bills that would help replace Common Core standards in Idaho public schools. As most parents know, Common Core is a benchmark that would tell us what students should know after completing each grade. Those standards are used in more than 40 states across the country, including Idaho, and has been since 2013, the school year that started then. House lawmakers voted not only to get rid of Common Core standards in English, arts, mathematics, and science, but to replace them. Representative Lance Cloud, the chairman of the House Education Committee, said this has been 2 years in the making. He added the changes, known as Idaho content standards, won't be remarkably different.
So when we started this, we had hours and hours and hours of hearings on the standards. People all over the state were upset about the Common Core components, and educators all over the state didn't want us to really change things so much that all of their curriculum had to be thrown out.
So as you heard Representative Ryan Kirby say, they gathered committees of teachers and parents, university professors to figure out how to get rid of these things that they felt didn't work. but still be able to meet certain standards. So what does that mean eventually? It means letting students learn the best way that works for them. Representative Clow said a number of education groups, including the Idaho Education Association, the Idaho School Boards Association, and the Idaho Association of Superintendents, they all support the passage of these bills, which they did without debate. And now on to the Senate. And if they make it into law, they would go into effect later this year. Katya Stepovic is talking to more lawmakers about these bills, and she's going to have more about that and their impacts coming up tonight on the news at 10. Budgets from JFAC, they weren't included in this expedited transmittal day, but budgets for Idaho's public K-12 schools just happened to line up on the calendar. This morning, JFAC approved $3.4 billion for Idaho's K-12 2023 education budget. It's an 8% total overall increase over last year, and it includes 7 big things, like pay raises, $103.6 million worth for teachers, $1,000 bonuses for teachers, classified staff, and administration. It includes better health benefits for teachers, staff, and their families, which has already been approved by the legislature and signed off by Governor Little. $74 million for school nutrition to keep school lunches free for everyone through the 2023 school year, and $46.7 million for early literacy programs. That money could go towards offering full-day kindergarten for families. But where's this money coming from, these billions of dollars? Well, about a third of it, $1 billion, will come from federal funds. The other $2.3 billion, they're going to come from Idaho's general funds, which is made up of taxpayer dollars. But it's an 11% increase over last year. Most of the budgets that passed today, they passed unanimously, except for early literacy. Both Representatives Ron Nate of Rexburg and Priscilla Giddings of Whitebird voted against the $46.7 million line item that would have made money available for early education. Those budgets still need to be approved by both the House and the Senate and then signed by the governor before becoming official. Over in the Senate, 13 bills on their list to get through today, including one that would require the legislature adjourn by the last Friday in March, like every year.
We hear talk all the time about how much it costs each day we are here in Boise, and this would give us a chance to look at our time here through the lens of a taxpayer, which, by the way, we all are a part of that group.
Senator Guthrie of McCammon tried to do this last session, but lawmakers were having none of it. In fact, they didn't really adjourn officially until the fall. This time, though, he made a few changes, including extending the deadline if the state is in a state of emergency or waiting to act on a gubernatorial veto, like if the governor vetoes something and they all need to kind of override that veto. The Senate passed 6 other bills this morning, and they're in session right now, working through the remainder of their list as we speak. So is the House. They're still working through their agenda today, and transmittal day, I don't think, is going to extend to tomorrow. I mean, it's one day for one reason, I guess. The respective chambers, though, still have to get to work on what was sent to them from the other chamber, so there's still plenty of work that needs to be done at the State House over the next few weeks. They're one of the only school districts in the state that still has a mask mandate, which was supposed to be in place through spring break. But with new guidelines issued, that drop point could drop sooner. We're not dropping this part of the show, the part where we ask you for your thoughts, questions, your comments, even your complaints. You name it, we'll take it, as long as it's clear, clean, and concise. 208-321-5614. That's the number. Just don't forget to include your name and the hashtag the 208. Oh, and stick around. We could be sharing yours at the end of the show.
From the V-set, please. We got a zip whip in. They said they want more.
All right, to mask or not to mask? And while it certainly has been a hot topic for the better part of the last 2 years, those requirements have been losing support the last few weeks. All levels of government have had to handle such questions, and none of them have come to a complete consensus. From city to city or school district to school district, they've all kind of set their own standards, and they haven't all really been the same. West Ada, for example, the largest school district in the state, has been mask optional for quite a while, while the Boise School District, they've had a mask mandate in for this whole school year. That is until now. In a unanimous vote, the Boise School District Board of Trustees voted to remove the district's mask mandate. They did that just today, and let's bring in Andrew Bartline about this, because Boise's been unwilling to shake this mask requirement for a long time. So what changed? Why now?
Well, actually, the plan didn't change. There was a plan in place that the Board of Trustees voted on in February. I think it was February 14th. And it had some mitigated measures in place, pulling back on some of those, mask requirement being one of them. So the plan didn't change. As it was voted in, it was approved. It wasn't implemented. That was the difference. The district planned to implement these changes after spring break. That would be the end of March. Between the approval of this updated plan and the expected implementation date, the CDC changed how they evaluate the risk of COVID in a community. Now, Ada County falls in the yellow category. That would be medium transmission. The CDC says masks are not needed indoors for areas in the yellow category. And moreover, the Boise School District's own COVID numbers are dropping. Over 900 COVID cases a week toward the end of January. Now 13 cases reported this past week. Weighing all of these pieces together, the Board of Trustees say this was an appropriate time to make the update.
Some patrons might feel that this decision, if passed, was speedy or in haste, but my reaction would be, if it does pass, is that this was carefully considered and in accordance with our plan and within CDC guidelines. And I'd also say it's consistent with the endemic committee's, I think, concept that I think we need to do a really good job of being laser focused in responding and addressing the ever-changing needs of COVID.
And I get that. If they're not needed, then I guess they're not needed. But we've seen these messages from parents, specifically in the Boise School District, kind of upset that they're actually doing away with mask mandates, even if it was after spring break. But this is kind of a thing. Did any of the people on the board, the trustees, kind of have any, I guess, reservations about doing this?
Well, yeah, there were some discussions going back and forth about whether this is the right time to do it, the time to do it now. And they were questioning administration because the administration ultimately gave the Board of Trustees this recommendation. They're the ones who would vote on it. So they asked if they remove this mask requirement, and it's universally supported. A few trustees admitted that a vote to approve this had some internal conflicts, namely people who are immunocompromised, have family members who are immunocompromised. And the plan originally was to implement these changes at the spring break, and that would allow students who would like to move to online to do that at the quarter. But with this update coming now before spring break, students who maybe aren't comfortable with it, they don't want to go to in-person school anymore, well, they have to wait to change to be enrolled in the online school until the quarter rolls over. So now students have to wait a few weeks before the quarter ends. The district says they can't accommodate for these couple weeks coming over, and they kind of explain it here.
So we would ask all of our schools to work with any students that felt that they could not attend in person for the remainder of this quarter, and providing work at home, work through the Google Classroom, work through Seesaw, so that those students could work from home until they could make a transfer to Boise Online School for the fourth quarter.
You feel confident that you can accommodate as needed those cases?
President Wagers, trustees, we do.
Thank you.
Now, to be clear on the language, the trustees did not approve optional masks for all. The way the language was approved is it's recommended masks for unvaccinated people and optional masks for vaccinated people.
So there's still that whole vaccination kind of delineation between them.
Yep, that was the language that the administration put forth, and that's what they voted on and approved.
Okay, so it didn't change much other than implementing it sooner than they had planned.
Couple weeks, yes.
All right, thanks, Andrew.
It is still winter, and Mother Nature wants to remind us of that. Not much of a temperature drop tomorrow, but we will see some spotty showers and a bit of a breeze that makes 47 probably feel a little closer to 40 tomorrow afternoon. The bigger changes Wednesday into Thursday, especially come Wednesday morning when we may wake up to some light accumulations of snow, and then we're in for blustery cold wind through the day ahead of that. So clouds increase through the overnight hours tonight. Scattered snow showers expected through the bulk of the day tomorrow in our mountain locations, and our chance to see some of those spotty rain showers will increase into the afternoon for the Treasure Valley. And while our temperatures drop overnight Tuesday into Wednesday morning, that's when the raindrops turn over to snow, and there could be some very minor light accumulations here in the valley. I'm thinking that favors more Ada County, a coating up to an inch, and mainly not on paved surfaces. So the morning commute, probably not a mess, but it's still something that we want to monitor. We'll update you as we move through closer to that part of the timeline. About 3 to 5 inches of snow on the way for our mountain locations. And here's a look at the 7-day forecast with a warm up in store for the weekend into next week.
You know, it's getting to be that time of year where we have to keep our eyes on the wildlife, possibly on the roadways. I guess that could be pretty much any time in Idaho. But as the weather warms up, it's a little bit more so. And maybe it's not always wildlife, but wildlife or life that isn't so wild. I guess tamed, maybe? I don't know. Take a look at this. There's an Idaho joke in here somewhere about sheep and crossing a road, and feel free to send those in, of course, to our text line, of course. But check out the pictures. These came from our Idaho Weather Watchers Facebook page by Debbie Terry Jensen. Saturday morning, Jensen says the sheep, which spent the winter near Swan Falls, herded, I should say, by the Saloon family from Weiser, they're on their way to be sheared before the summer season. Yeah, get that short haircut in so you can enjoy the summer. Eventually, they're going to head up to Midvale, end up near Brundage Mountain for the summer, and they're going to make the journey back to the Treasure Valley in the fall. That is a lot of sheep to keep control of, and I bet you they have a pretty good tassel of dogs out there, too, to help them along with that. If you missed it, don't worry. There's a similar sight you're going to see coming in April. Every year, Frank Schertz, a rancher from Wilder, herds hundreds of sheep from Wilder. Around mid-April, you can see these sheep crossing Highway 55 in Eagle as they head towards Idaho City, and eventually they make their way all the way to Sun Valley, where they are going to stay for the summer. We'll be right back. All right, final minute of the show. Let's take a look at some of the comments you sent in. A lot of people talking about the ballot boxes being banned, at least according to the House, making its way to the Senate. The right to vote in a democracy should be the easiest thing to do for any citizen who is a registered voter. Period. End of statement. I question why the IFF-backed legislators want to make it difficult for people to vote. Who do they fear? Asks Steve. If the legislators don't want to make voting easier for Idaho voters, then maybe they need to make polling days state holidays so folks can be off work to vote. So infuriating they don't want to be make voting convenient for people. Have any of these legislators worked an election? Maybe they should try it so they know exactly how it works. Extremely safe, not a problem. Leave it alone, says Michelle, who's actually a poll worker. We mailed our tax returns and the post office lost them. So mailing in your ballot isn't perfect either. We prefer drop boxes, says BJ. See you tomorrow.